Okay, so today we're going to be talking about photosynthesis and the two reaction cycles that photosynthesis uses. So photosynthesis occurs in the chloroplast of plants, and it's done in two big ways. One is through light reactions that occur in the thylakoids, and the other one is through the Calvin cycle, where CO2 is brought in, and then using ATP and NADPH from the thylakoids, from the light reactions, you can turn in that CO2 into carbohydrates or sugars. So a question is proposed up here: how does the Calvin cycle produce glucose? And so the Calvin cycle can be divided into three primary steps or phases. The first step being CO2 fixation, the second step being CO2 reduction, and the third being the regeneration of RUBP. So what happens with this Calvin cycle first is CO2 is brought in and is attached to RUBP. CO2 and RUBP are brought in together. It's then attached using a ribosome enzyme, creating a 6-carbon molecule. So it came in RUBP as 5 carbon, and then it ended up being a 6-carbon molecule, which is not good. It's unstable, causing it then to break down into two little 3PGs, okay? And that's for the CO2 fixation. The second one is CO2 reduction. In CO2 reduction, again, this is our second phase, we are going to use energy and add electrons to break down our 2,3PG and into hopefully again G3P. Now we do this by adding ATP that we've gotten originally from our thylakoids, and we also use it by adding electrons from our NADPH that we also got from our thylakoids. So after a series of reactions, 3PG is finally reduced and we have G3P. Now the G3P, one of them is going to be a net gain, so we're going to keep one of those and that's going to be added, and it's going to be used to form glucose later. The other ones are going to stay in the Calvin cycle into our next phase of regeneration of RUBP. Now, other things are happening. So we're using the ATP, the adenine triphosphate, and we're going to be left with ADP, diphosphate. That is going to be sent back to the thylakoids, and also NADPH is going to be reduced to NADP, and that's going to be also sent back to the thylakoids to make it ATP and make it NADPH again for another cycle. So that is the second phase, CO2 reduction. The next phase is, in this third phase of regeneration of RUBP, again, we're gonna use ATP to turn our G3P into RUBP, effectively starting the phase again. Now this ATP is gonna, of course, turn into adenine diphosphate, and that's going to be lost again, and it's going to head back over there to add another phosphate group to make ATP again. So RUBP, again, it's going to start the Calvin cycle all over again. And effectively, you're going to need about 6 times to go around this little circle of phases to make a glucose molecule. And that is photosynthesis using the Calvin cycle.